Stephen Kinnock.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. On the 23rd of June 2016, the people of this country voted to leave, as did a majority of my own constituents. The result was won on a narrow margin, but the result was clear, which is why I voted to trigger Article 50. However, when we triggered Article 50, I argued that we needed a Brexit deal that reflected the narrow margin and that could bring Leave and Remain voters together, which is why I argued then as now for an EEA-based Brexit, of which I'll say a little more later. Barely a year after that referendum, the Prime Minister called an election in which she hoped to secure a mandate for a hard Brexit. But the British people said no, and so the Prime Minister saw her majority disappear. Any sensible government would at that point accept and commit itself to a sensible Brexit, one that can bridge the divide, one that accepts that compromises must be made if we're to secure a mutually beneficial deal from this process. As Michel Barnier's famous escalator slide makes clear, the Prime Minister's red lines leave us with little choice but a Canada-based free trade arrangement. But a Canada deal is about as much use as a chocolate teapot. It fails to cover services, which account for 80% of the British economy. It does nothing to resolve the issues regarding our relationship with the EU agencies, just under half of which have no provision whatsoever for third country participation. And a Canada-based deal leads inexorably to a hard border in Ireland. Now, I'm sure that the government toadies and Brextremists on the backbenches are going to repeat ad nauseam the Prime Minister's line about a bespoke deal, that all deals involve cherry-picking and so on. But to do so fundamentally misunderstands not only this process, but that of all trade negotiations, because the fact is that all trade deals are a blend of off-the-shelf and bespoke. See, the Brexit negotiations are, first of all, about deciding on the foundations, and the foundations have to be based on a basic template, whether it's an EEA, FTA, or association model. Once you have agreement on the foundations, you can then move on to an argument about the doors, the windows, and the roof of that house. So it's clear that the fundamental problem with the government's approach to these negotiations has been an inability to accept that you must agree that foundational model or template as the basis for negotiations going forward. And I think it's absolutely unforgivable that just over a week from the EU agreeing the guidelines for future relationship phase of our negotiations, that the government is still talking about all the things that perhaps it could do, rather blue sky, vague and sufficiently inoffensive so as not to alienate any particular wing of the Conservative Party. And that is a profound abdication of duty and responsibility on the part of the government, because it's left a vacuum and allowed the EU to define our destiny for us. Ever since the referendum, we've been on the back foot because the government has utterly failed to define the terms of the debate. And this leads us, I hope, inexorably and ultimately towards the conclusion that we need an exit on the basis of an EEA EFTA deal. An EEA EFTA-based Brexit with a customs union provision building on the Protocol 10 precedent or seeking something deeper can provide that overarching framework for a deal that is not only achievable, but one that is, to both Leave and Remain voters, desirable. And what's more, an EEA-based Brexit could navigate a path around the government's red lines, because the EEA is not the same as the single market and must not be conflated with it. The EEA is an internal market between much of, but not all of the single market, and 3 of the 4 EFTA states. The EEA excludes fisheries and agriculture, but the key point here is that the EEA is predicated on a fundamentally different legal and political purpose to that of the single market. Whilst the EU single market is predicated on the Treaty of the European Union with its aim of ever closer union, the EEA internal market is based on the EEA agreement, the purpose of which is to, and I quote, promote a continuous and balanced strengthening of trade and economic relations between the contracting parties. So the fact is that the EEA is in essence a reversion to the European Community based on the terms of the Single European Act of 1986. Moreover, we have Articles 112 and 113 of the EEA Agreement, which allow for the reform of any of the 4 freedoms, including the free movement of people. And this has already been done. The Protocol 15 precedent enshrines a quota-based system in Liechtenstein and would have been available to the Swiss had they voted to join the EEA back in 1992, and so it would be a lever at our disposal should we wish to join the EEA. The EEA meets another red line, which is ending the jurisdiction of the ECJ. The EEA is overseen by the EFTA Arbitration Court, which, with UK membership, would have a plurality of UK judges. The EFTA Court regularly rules in a different manner to the ECJ and frequently sets precedents that are later followed by the ECJ. In the EEA, this House would be wholly sovereign. We would see an end to direct effect, and through the right of reservation, we would possess a veto on EEA rules. What's more, EEA members have considerable rule-shaping powers through the various committees of the EU, as well as retaining an influence on the EU position at the WTO, alongside possessing our own seat at the table as the UK. I will give way.
I'd like to thank the member for giving way. He's making a powerful case about the EEA and EFTA, and although I think it is unfortunate that he's describing the Canada deal as a chocolate teapot, because it did give free trade in chocolate.
Help, because it's meant to be a quick intervention. It's fine. No, order. No, there's no quickly, because you need to explain to your front bench when I cut them down to 8 minutes each. That's what the intervention is, not a speech. Stephen Kinnock.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. In short, if you're looking for a common-sense Brexit that strikes a pragmatic balance between prosperity and sovereignty, then the EEA is the only game in town. Maximum access to the single market with the ability to reform free movement, resolve the Northern Ireland issue, end the jurisdiction of the ECJ, and above all, reunite our deeply divided country. I will give it.
The problem with the EEA is that you have to cut and paste all EU rules, especially on key sectors like financial services. Isn't a bespoke deal a better thing to fight for?
I thank the honourable lady. As I said, what this has to be is a blend of a template and a bespoke deal. That's the issue that the government has fundamentally failed to understand, that you must first of all in these negotiations create common ground, territory based on models and templates that are familiar to both sides at the negotiating table. Of course, then things can be tweaked and finessed, but the basic model of the EEA gives us the architecture and the certainty that the country is so desperately crying out for. It would have also put the British government on the front foot rather than leaving a vacuum into which the EU has been obliged to step. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the referendum exposed many of the deep divisions that have existed in our country for many years. Divisions between young and old, town and city, graduate and non-graduate. These came together as we coalesced behind tribe remain or tribe leave. But we must not allow the tribalism of the referendum to define our destiny. We must come together. We must find a way to reunite this country, to find compromise between remain and leave, and to place that compromise at the heart of our negotiating strategy. And, Mr. Deputy Speaker, in the EEA EFTA, we have the answer to protecting market access, jobs and opportunities, the answer to a frictionless border in Northern Ireland, the answer to the call to take back control on immigration in our courts and in this House. So let us come together, let us reunite Britain, and let us build an EEA-based Brexit.